What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, and today we're doing something a little different. So this channel and Halloween, by the way, happy Halloween, actually do have something in common. And that thing is that this channel's anniversary date is Halloween. So it has officially been 6 years since I made this channel, and I decided to make something kind of just talking about my experience in those 6 years, especially because, as most people on this channel are aware, most of our growth has happened in the last year and a half. Before that, it was really just a creative outlet for me where I got to just make little videos about stuff that I thought was interesting that I didn't really get to talk about in my personal life because nobody I know really enjoys games nearly as much as I do, or at least the same type of games. So it's not something I got to talk about a lot. So with this video, I kind of just want to, again, talk about my experience in the last 6 years and also just talk about some of the things about YouTube I like, things I don't like, just a wide variety of subjects, which hopefully won't come across as too rambly because while there are some things I want to talk about, I'm not trying to give this too much structure just because I want it to feel a little more organic and me just talking, you know? So first things first, 6 years ago, October 31st, 2015. That was a time in my life where I felt like I was working a dead-end job on third shift that I didn't feel like was going anywhere. And basically I was just doing the same thing constantly. I was in a rut, if you want to put it that way, but like I just hated it so much and I just needed to do something. And I've always loved video games, pretty much since I first found out they were a thing. And so I decided the best way to do that was start a YouTube channel. And I just started making little videos about stuff I thought was interesting. Now, I'm going to level with you guys. If you go back and watch any of those, most of them are terrible. It took me a few years even after that point to really decide on what I wanted to cover, and some more time after that to figure out how to best convey that to people. Because, especially as people might have noticed with my reviews after 100% and how quickly I tear through games, I play games a bit differently than most people, and I take in a lot of information all at once. And then I use that to tear through games. I read really fast, so I'm usually reading dialogue before characters can finish their voice lines, so I'm just skipping through their voice stuff because I prefer to just read it most of the time. And I just tear through games. A lot of people actually pointed out that my last Islanti competition stream for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous that I finished up a couple weeks ago, which, by the way, tomorrow, Monday, is when the official end of that is, so we might actually get the official leaderboard for the end of the competition. But I completed that entire run in like literally 1 minute under 62 hours. And truth be told, that was me going kind of slow. So I actually talked about this at the very last stream that I did kind of towards the end there. Most of that was me trying to play it safe and play in turn-based. And, you know, normally I don't do that. Normally I skip through just tons of stuff because I already know what it is. I'm playing not in turn-based, which is faster. And this is a game other people are reporting taking like 150 hours for their first playthrough, which is mind-boggling to me. I don't see spending that much time on it. At least not on one playthrough. But all that to tell you that I play games a little differently than most people. And that's important because when it comes to conveying the information in said video games back to people, that was something I really struggled with at the start of the channel. Yes, I am actually going somewhere with this. Because the early days of the channel, and even the videos that actually did well, probably the very first video that did very well, was a character creation video I did for Divinity Original Sin 2. And truth be told, I hate that video, but I learned a great deal from it. And I was just kind of going through character creation, talking about like individual points, and I was like, oh, here's all this information. People will know what to do with this. And the thing is, people don't all the time. You know, some people will, of course. But see, I look at all that information and I just kind of like, oh, I'll do this, this, and this. But as it turns out, that's not the best way of conveying information by just, you know, throwing it all out there at people, expecting them to know what to do with it. So I've since had to refine how I play video games and how I approach gleaning that information and how best to present it to people in videos. And truth be told, that was probably the biggest challenge I came across personally as a content creator, was taking how I approach games and presenting it in a way people will actually find useful. Because a lot of those videos, especially looking back from, you know, my perspective now, yeah, like a lot of those videos just weren't useful to people because of the way I was conveying that information. So a lot of the early years of the channel were just that, kind of learning what I wanted to cover, how best to cover it, and then, unsurprisingly, the event, shall we call it, at the start of 2020 kind of put the world in lockdown, and, you know, everybody was spending more time at home, and this channel actually noticed a noticeable uptick in viewership. And at this point, I had like a little over 1,000 subscribers, but even just that uptick was enough for me to kind of glean ideas from what people were looking at. And then I started doing the reviews after 100%, and people were really into those. And with the uptick in viewership, I was able to be like, oh, people really like this thing. And so it just kind of became a weird combination of the way I play video games becoming like this fairly thorough but not overly spoilery review that people kind of really latched onto and liked the idea of. I mean, not everybody likes it because that's the way the world works, but those reviews I noticed did really well, and I kind of just started leaning into that and leaning into CRPGs because that's what I played the most of, and people especially don't like 100%ing those because it takes forever. But I do it pretty regularly. So I kind of found that just reviewing those things always brought in a lot of views. I was already doing a ton of lore stuff for the Divinity series because I love that series as well. And I love talking about the lore of these universes. So it all just kind of finally started to cascade into me finding what I was good at, what I wanted to cover, and what people actually wanted to see from me. And then, honestly, backing some projects on Kickstarter actually helped out a lot because that, of course, gives you things like beta access, which is how I got access to the Wrath of the Righteous beta, which that content specifically is probably what catapulted most of my growth, if we're being real. And truthfully, I do have the analytics to prove that, because most of my growth can factually be attributed to reviews after 100% and literally all of my Pathfinder content. Nowadays, the channel just passed 28k subscribers, and honestly, it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. I've got a bunch of content planned as well as games to cover, games I want to talk about, games I want to 100%. And the growth has been so crazy that I've actually been able to step away from working full-time and jumping into this channel full-time, because in the last couple months, I've actually made more money doing YouTube than I made as a salaried manager working for a retail company. With that said, I'd like to talk a bit about kind of that part of my life and how it kind of related back to YouTube and stuff. I've mentioned this here and there, but I was actually homeless as a teenager. Slept in abandoned houses, ate out of trash cans, homeless. But I always made it to school. I actually graduated on time. A family took me in when I was 17, who are to this day the people I consider my family. And while not wholly relevant to the YouTube channel, I did want to mention that because that period of my life, video games and technology were the most fascinating things in the world to me because they always felt so out of reach. And it's just something I always just kind of naturally had an affinity for. I don't really make much content about it, but I tear apart computers and put them back together all the time. I'm actually a certified desktop repair tech. And on the side, I will actually fix computers in addition to doing YouTube stuff. That is a thing that people will pay me for. That's kind of work I just take on as I want it, though, so it's not something I do all the time. But it's always just been kind of a side hustle of mine. It's something I'm very good at. But at that point in my life, that stuff was out of reach. And before that, I was actually super poor as well, as you might imagine. You don't just wind up being homeless at 15 because things are going well. So there's this 10-year gap where I just couldn't interact with this technology and stuff the way I wanted to. So when I finally got out on my feet, I actually joined the Army right out of high school. I was in the Army for a while, and then I actually got a job with Walmart, of all places, right afterwards, which is the retail company that I first worked for about 8 years. And for about the first 4 years I worked there, I worked third shift, just doing entry-level stuff, and it paid well enough to pay my bills. I lived alone at the time. I worked third shift, and most of my life was I would work, I would come home, I'd play video games, and I just got into this rut. So cue Halloween 2015. I'm sitting alone. I got nothing to do on Halloween. And I was like, if I don't find some way to change this, I'm going to lose my mind. So I started the YouTube channel. And more than anything during this time, that really served as a creative outlet that honestly kept me from going crazy. I actually wound up becoming a salaried manager after moving up a couple times with Walmart, which was great for me because the money was pretty awesome, actually. That is money I was able to pay off my car, buy my house with, and truthfully, put myself in a financial situation that allowed me to step away from work to actually do this YouTube channel full-time without taking on any real risk. Now, I actually left Walmart after being a salaried manager for about 4 years due to, as you might imagine, drama. I won't go into the details, and I'm sure Walmart has their side of it. I'll put it this way. Walmart was forced to pay me a significant amount of money because of the way we parted ways. They actually had to pay me about almost half a year's salary when I left because of the way it all went down. And then at this time, keep in mind, this is right before the lockdown started, maybe a month before all that started. So it took me 3 days to find a job, literally 3 days. I had a ton of experience in retail, and I got a job working for another retailer where I dealt with contractor sales. This company was actually Lowe's. Truthfully, I had a pretty good experience there, but that's not really what this video is about. Nonetheless, during this time, honestly, the reduced hours of just going back to an hourly job allowed me to lean into more content creation. And then that allowed me to do the things that set up my channel for success. And then that kind of snowballed into all the success over the past year, where I have just kind of exploded channel-wise and things are going incredibly well. And I would like to keep them going well. But probably the best thing about moving to YouTube full-time isn't honestly just playing the games and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy playing video games. Obviously, I don't think much of anybody's in a place to complain when they're playing video games for a living. But the best thing about doing this full-time is that I get to spend the days I have my son with my son. Because throughout all of that, I did actually meet a girl, we had our son, things went south, we're not together anymore. But I do have my son half the week, and this job allows me to spend all of my time with him on the days that I have him. Not working and then picking him up afterwards. I get to spend my time with my boy, and that is hands down the best part of doing this full time for me. Because as much as I love video games and content creation, there's honestly nothing I enjoy more than spending time with my boy. He's in his terrible twos, so he's pretty young. The fact that I get to not have to work and get to spend time with him means the world to me personally. But there's kind of the stuff that's happened YouTube-wise and just over the years, kind of consolidated down, as you might imagine. But now I want to talk about some of the stuff I enjoy about YouTube, some of the stuff I do not enjoy about YouTube. And we're going to start with the less positive stuff, because I don't want to end the video with the less positive stuff. That wouldn't be very fun. But things I don't like about YouTube. I mean, there's a lot, not necessarily YouTube specifically, but sometimes the way people interact with it can be a little frustrating. But in my experience in particular, there are a couple things that come up a lot. One, I have a small speech impediment. It's not very big. Most people wouldn't even notice it. However, sometimes it does affect the way I say things, and people will comment on it, and I find it incredibly annoying, because I don't like telling everyone I have a speech impediment, because truthfully, it doesn't mean much to me, but I actually had to have speech classes and stuff when I was in kindergarten, and it fixed most of it, but there are words and stuff that to this day are just hard for me to say. And every once in a while, you'll get these rude comments. To paraphrase, people are like, I don't like the way you talk. And it's like, dude, I don't know what you expect me to do about that, but have a nice day, I guess. And then the other kind of half of that is people telling me how to pronounce things. That drives me up a wall. Now, I realize these people are just trying to help, so I'm usually pretty polite about it, but it's just a pet peeve of mine. Like, one that's very common is I pronounce kobolds. A lot of people will tell me how it's pronounced kobolds, and I'm like, I'm not going to say it that way, because it's hard for me to say that. I have to, go out of my way to physically overpronounce kobolds, and I don't like the way it makes my jaw be forced to move, because, again, I have a speech impediment, which is mostly a muscle thing in my jaw, which makes it hard for me to pronounce certain things that I'm not used to saying very often. Now, the other easy to point out negative thing is that, yeah, sometimes you're going to get people that just don't like you. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. I don't know. They don't like the sound of your voice. They don't like your content. They don't like the fact that you're successful. Could be many things. Hard to say for sure. Doesn't really matter to me much. Because I'll put it this way. I was once homeless. I was once in the army. Nothing someone says behind a keyboard online is going to hurt me as a person. I'm not suddenly going to be like, man, I need to rethink my life because Lord 42069 didn't like something I said. It's just not going to happen. So honestly, that doesn't bother me very much. And honestly, there's a chat filter you can set up as a content creator on YouTube where you can set up words and things that will just be flagged and won't even let the comment be posted. And primarily, this is used for, people just being incredibly rude, saying a bunch of vulgar language, calling people names, that kind of stuff. You can kind of set it up to filter all that stuff out. So a lot of times these comments won't even get through. In my opinion, that's something that's pretty easy for me to ignore, if I even see it at all. Now, another thing about YouTube, so I obviously focus on video games pretty exclusively, and one thing in particular about video game content I've always found frustrating are the news channels. And I don't want to call out anybody in particular because truthfully, it's kind of all of them in some form or fashion. And I do watch those channels, and I do enjoy some of their content, so I don't mean this in a mean way. But a lot of times, the way news in video games is presented or talked about or discussed is useless. To use a very recent example, there was that Avowed leak that happened a couple weeks ago, where somebody got some details on a couple of gameplay types, and they talked about it, and literally all I could think of when I saw some of the leaks about that were everything here is something anyone familiar with fantasy RPGs probably could have just guessed. So it's even if it's true, who did this help? Who is this news to? And as a result, I tend to stay away from news myself. If it pertains to a particular game and I have gameplay and stuff I can show of that update that I think people will enjoy, I'll cover it. But stuff where it's just we got this big leak from so-and-so, I do not care. That leak doesn't affect me at all. It doesn't affect any content I'm going to make. And I think the way some of these news channels cover it is dumb. And I get why they do it. Obviously, they're trying to get their views and stuff, so they make their money. And I'm not going to knock anybody for trying to do that, but I do generally find that most of the way video game news is handled is just really stupid. Now, one other pet peeve that I find about YouTube stuff, and then I'll move on. I regularly kind of like make guides and stuff for games. If you're watching this, chances are you've watched some of those. And I try to just make things as informational and accessible as possible. And one thing that'll annoy me is when people will comment on, say, a build video and be like, oh yeah, but it'll be better if you do this. I'm not trying to make it better or the best. I'm trying to make it accessible. So people jumping onto videos, especially of games I've 100%ed, and then, just being like, oh, well, this sucks for this reason. Well, it's like, just because you prefer something doesn't mean this is bad or it won't work for people. So people kind of just being over the top with their like, this is how you play this game type of stuff has always kind of annoyed me. And you do kind of see that crop up in comments every once in a while. For instance, the famous example of you're talking about a Wrath of the Righteous build and somebody's like, oh yeah, but it would be better if you took 2 dips into Monk. And I'm like, I don't care about monk dips, dude. I don't. Not every build needs a monk dip because it's dumb. Maybe I just want to roleplay a character who isn't a monk or didn't spend a weird year training as a monk as a roleplay background. You don't need to add that to everything. So that's kind of the stuff I'm talking about. Like I said, ended on a positive. The thing I love the most about being on YouTube is when I'll make a guide or something like that, and someone will comment and tell me how much like, hey, this particular thing that you did helped me immensely. That's the kind of stuff I love because that's what I'm doing it for. So seeing people get value out of that has always meant a lot to me personally. It makes what I do much more fulfilling. Another cool thing it's given me the opportunity to do is just play games and stuff that I might not otherwise have ever gotten the chance to. And truth be told, having a YouTube channel with a decent amount of subscribers kind of gives me the ability to reach out to developers and stuff directly who are, say, gearing up for a beta and being like, hey, I would like access to this beta so I can show it off. And usually they're like, yeah, sure. That kind of stuff is really nice. And then there's the obvious stuff like getting to play video games for most of the day and kind of sharing that with everyone, which is something I'm passionate about. Obviously, that's a huge perk in and of itself. And then probably just the other big positive is that I finally have exactly what I made this channel for. And that was a creative outlet where I could talk about the thing I am passionate about and share that with people and have conversations with people who are also passionate about this thing. And honestly, that has done a world for my mental health and just my happiness because, at least in the area of the world I live in, the games that I really enjoy and the ones that I play all the time obsessively, like all of these CRPGs that I cover really, no one really wants to talk about. You tell people you're interested in games and they're just like, oh man, Call of Duty, right? And I'm like, I could not care less about a Call of Duty game. Or any other shooter for that matter, for the most part. So this channel enables me to do that, and the only thing that particular part pales in comparison to is the time I get to spend with my son now that I'm doing this full time. And for that alone, I truly can't thank you guys enough because everyone's support is what allows me to do that. And I'm hoping that the first 6 years it took to get to this point see us go even farther in the next 6 years because I love doing this. A lot of people seem to love watching it. And as long as that keeps up, I'm going to keep doing this. So truly, cannot say it sincerely enough. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do this for a living, talk about the things I love to talk about, and through your support, giving me the chance to spend every day with my son. So truly, thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.